everyone, welcome to our channel, Rebecca, Stu, and the crew. We have a fun craft today using items from the Dollar Tree. We're going to make these little gnomes that are on a stand and they're interchangeable for different seasons. We're also going to add a second part, which is adding these little shadow box houses to the stand to decorate as well. So let's go over our supplies first for part one, which will be the gnome. We'll use one of the wood cutout gnome pieces from Dollar Tree and some of their mops. And if you don't have the mop, you could just use some yarn of your choice for the beard. We're also going to use some paint and white. We'll need some black paint, and we will use the light mocha for the skin tone. We're also going to need some paint brushes and either a foam ball, or you could use a bead for the nose. And we'll use the Crafters square felt rolls in any color that you choose, as well as some ribbon that coordinates to make the outfit. We're also going to use a few of these magnetic buttons and the large crafting sticks. We'll also use a few of these wood craft cubes and a few of the large wood planks. We're also going to need some hot glue, a pencil, and a pair of scissors. So we're going to get started with part one. So let's get crafty. The first thing we're going to do is make the gnome on the stand. So taking this wood gnome piece, we're going to cut the feet. We'll make some arms and a nose. We're just going to cut off the foot at an angle here, and then we're going to cut off that little piece of beard that's hanging over the side to make it look like it's just a boot. And you can use regular scissors for this. You don't want to use your best pair of scissors, but you do need a sharp pair. So as you can see, we just cut right along the side to create the boot, and then we'll cut the other side off at an angle as well and do the exact same thing, removing the beard. Then just turn them back to back and then even them up a little bit at the top. Now you don't really have to worry about the fact that the boots are two different sizes. Once you paint them, you're not going to notice, but you do want them about the same length on the top, and you want that little piece at the top that rises above the shoe, because we're going to tuck this up underneath of some felt when we create the legs, which is part two. So now taking the large craft stick, we need two for each leg. So what we're going to do is just cut the craft stick in half, and that'll be our first leg. Just put them next to each other, make sure they're the same length. You just want to cut them in half as close as possible as you can get them, and then cut a second stick in half for this second leg. And now that we have those apart, all we're going to do is use a little bit of hot glue and layer the two popsicle sticks here so that we have a little bit more thickness to work with when we're creating the leg, and it helps make the whole gnome just a little bit more sturdy when we put the whole thing together to double up the popsicle stick here. And then we'll do the second leg the same, just using some hot glue. And now we're going to start making the outfit. So taking our white foam or felt from the Dollar Tree, we're just going to add a little bit of hot glue to the back of the popsicle stick and then get it right on the edge of the felt and stick it on. And then we'll do the same with the second leg right next to them, to the other one, and just leave like a little space in between so that you can cut them apart. And add a little bit more hot glue and then just roll them over to get a nice tight cover over the legs here. And then go ahead and cut out a rectangle around, and then we'll glue that one little extra piece on. That way the felt is wrapped all the way around the popsicle sticks for the legs, and then we'll cut those apart in just a second. Then just cut the rest of the felt and glue down any little bit of excess onto the back. And then when you do put your legs on your gnome, you're going to want to make sure that your seam for the felt is to the back of the gnome. So we'll just cut our legs apart. And this is what we have so far. So now we're going to start working on the feet. We're just going to paint them black, and make sure you paint the back and the edges of the boots, because you will be able to see the edges of them. Not really the back as much depending on where you put it, but you can see them a little bit. So now that the feet are dry, we're just going to take some hot glue and put it right in the end of one of the legs, and then tuck that boot up underneath of the felt. And once you slide it underneath there, all you want to do is pinch it together and that'll help any glue like kind of go around the back of it and seal it up. So these are both of the legs with the feet on. And now we're going to cut 2 strips of felt or ribbon, and we're going to use that to wrap around where the foot and the leg come together. And this will help hide the seam and dress up our outfit just a little bit. You just attach it with hot glue, wrap it around. Again, you want to make sure when you're done that all of your seams are on the same side. So you want to make sure that you end it on the back. And we'll do the same thing for leg number 2. And this is what they look like so far. So now we're going to work on the arms. So we're going to use the large craft sticks, and we're going to make them total length. They'll be 2 inches long. So I made one first as a trial. You can draw it out on paper first if you like and cut it out. So basically you're just creating a shoulder, and then you're going to do these 2 little triangle notches, and that's going to be where the wrist is at. If you put too much detail into the arms, the wood does split when you cut it. That's why we're just doing it this way. So you just want to cut around that shoulder there, and then cut these 2 little notches out to make our wrist. Now, once I had the first one done, I just traced it on the popsicle stick so that they were exactly the same size, or as close to the same size as possible. So it's a very simple arm. There's not a lot of detail or drawing involved. So now that that's done, we're going to add some felt to just the front of the arms. We don't need to wrap the back, but you want to make sure you're only putting the felt on right to where the wrist starts so that we have a separation there and you can still see where the hand starts. And then just trim around the felt there with your scissors. And the reason we're not going to add the felt to the back is just because you're not going to see it. Once we put the beard on and the way we glue the arms on, you're not going to be able to see the back of the arms at all. So it's really not necessary to wrap the whole thing in felt. Now, if you want to wrap the whole thing in felt, you can do that. That's fine, but it's just not necessary. And that's arm number 1 done. And here's the second one. And now we'll go ahead and paint the hands, whatever skin tone you choose. This looks a little bit lighter. I did use the light mocha paint color, but it looks a lot lighter on camera. And then I did the same color for the nose. And then I did end up adding a little bit of pink on the nose just to make it have a little bit of like redness to it. And then we're going to do the same thing with felt or ribbon as we did for the feet. In the legs, we're going to wrap a little strip around the separation between the outfit and the hand just to help separate it. And make sure all of your seams again are to the back. And so we've got our nose, our arms, and legs almost finished. So now we're going to start working on the beard. So what you want to do is you want to take your pieces of your mop and you want to lay them right underneath where the hat starts and go all the way down so it just goes past the beard on your little gnome sign. And then take a small pair of scissors, and there's this little string that holds it together where it's knotted in all those little spots. If you just cut that little piece, it comes right apart. So you want to take that little piece of thread off of all those little binding spots all the way to the top, but you want to leave the one at the top because this is what's going to hold it all together when we construct our beard. So that's our first piece done. And then you just want to repeat this with about 4, 5, 6 pieces. It depends on how full you want your beard to be. Once we have that all done, we're going to take a piece of felt and measure across the distance of the hat and just mark it with a pencil. This is where we're going to be gluing the pieces of our beard. So we're just going to take a little bit of hot glue, and then the binding that we left on the top of the mop pieces, that's the part that's going to be glued to the felt. And just keep gluing those pieces all the way across. And now that we have all of our beard pieces on, we're going to take that excess felt that we had, because we cut about a 10-inch piece, and then we're just going to fold it over the top of the beard. And this is going to help bind it all together. We'll just use some hot glue there and then add a little bit more hot glue, flip it over, and just put the rest of the felt down so that we have it wrapped all the way around the beard there with a lot of glue. That's going to help keep it all together. So now it looks a little bit rough and we need to clean the beard up a little bit. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to take just a comb or a brush and very lightly just start combing over the strands of the mop. You want to take your time and make sure you hold the top that you glued together just so it doesn't come out, because it does kind of get stuck a little bit as you're combing through. And just keep brushing it and it'll help really fluff it up and make it not look like a mop and more like a beard. So once you have it all combed out, just grab it all together and trim up the bottom, any little scraggly pieces that came out. So here's what it looks like so far. And then once we put it on our gnome, we can go ahead and curve the sides a little bit and even it up and just make it look more like a beard. As you can see, I trimmed up the sides there. So before we glue it on, we're going to paint our gnome white to cover all of the markings that was on the little wood cutout that they printed on it from the Dollar Tree. So we'll let that dry, and once that's dry, we'll start working on the hat. So for the hat, we're just going to take our gnome and using our hot glue, just put a strip of hot glue right at the bottom of the hat, and then cover the hat as well as you can. Just really pay attention to the edges for the most part. And then just like we did with the arms and legs, we're going to flip it over and lay it down on our felt. I don't know why I keep calling it foam, you guys, and just stick it down to the felt. And then go ahead and trim around it with your scissors. If you want to, you can actually trace around the hat and cut it out first. It was a little bit hard to get a few areas around the curves of the hat, but I wasn't really too worried about all of the details. So I just cut around it the best that I could. So once your hat's all done and cut out, we're going to go ahead and attach the beard. So just using some hot glue, you want to make sure that that beard is right up underneath that brim of the hat. And then we're going to cover that piece of the binding for the beard with some ribbon. Now you can use ribbon, you could use more felt, really anything you have. I chose to use ribbon just because I like the color of the ribbon that I had, and it was a little bit easier. I didn't have to worry about trying to cut the felt super straight for as much of the hat brim that we needed there. And then just glue it and make sure you have all of your seams again to the back. And I ended up making the brim of the hat a little bit wider, so I used 2 pieces of the ribbon. So now I'm just making a very simple bow. So I have 2 pieces of white ribbon and I just make an X. And then I use the gray ribbon and then a little bit of pink. And you just want to keep layering it with little dots of hot glue and just going in between all of the little spaces so all the ribbon is visible. So I used 2 pieces of each color and then I glued a little button right to the center. And this will be for the ball of the hat. Now we're going to take some of our yarn and we're going to decorate the hat. So I took the gray yarn and just put a little bit of hot glue on the back and then wrapped it around the hat. And it's easy to wrap around just because all these little notches in the hat kind of help hold it in place as you wrap it. And you just want to go all the way around to about where the ball of the hat would begin. And because of those little notches and the way it holds it in place, you don't need a lot of hot glue. You can just wrap it around and it will stay, and then just glue your second end down. Now, if you want, you can add some extra hot glue to the back underneath of the little pieces of ribbon, but as you're wrapping it, it's not necessary to stop and add hot glue. You can do it after. And then I took some really thin pink ribbon and wrapped that in between all of the gray pieces. So we have this really cute striped hat. And we're just going to put it down with the hot glue like we did with the rest. And now we're going to decorate the arms and legs to match the hat. So we just did it the exact same way. We used the yarn first and then the pink ribbon second. And we're just creating this little striped outfit. I thought it looked a little bit better to be a little bit more decorative. You can leave it plain if you like. You don't have to wrap the ribbon around. It's really an optional part of the craft. And here's what it looks like finished. And then we did the arms as well. So now we're going to start assembling our gnome. So we're just going to glue the little ball of the hat on. And next we'll just glue on the nose. You want to get it right up, kind of like halfway between the brim of the hat and then the beard, because it looks like the hat's pulled over his eyes. And then flip it over and we'll glue the legs on. Just make sure that your feet are going the right direction and that your seams are on the back. And then we'll glue the arms on. So to glue the arms on, I just moved the beard over a little bit and add some hot glue. And then we didn't glue it flat. I kind of held it up at an angle so it's not... we want to be able to put things underneath of the arms, if that makes sense. You want them up at an angle, so you need to hold them in place while they're drying, and they just need to be lifted up just a little bit. So just move the beard over a little bit so you can glue it straight to the wood, and then the beard actually helps hold it up off of the back of the gnome so that they glue on at an angle. And then we're going to glue our magnet on. So just separate the beard right in the center and glue your magnet right to the wood in the middle of the arms. And then just fix your beard. Now, depending on what you want to put on his arms, you can just glue some extra magnets to the backs of the little pieces that you're going to use. I have a lot of different things I use from Dollar Tree. So I used a heart, there was a carrot, I have a snowflake, I even had a little bit of flowers and things. You just want to make sure that your magnets are facing the right way so that when you put them together, they're not repelling and they're attracting each other. So make sure you glue them on in the right direction. And now we're going to make the stand for the gnome. So we're going to take some of these woodcraft cubes and one of the large wood planks that is the rectangle, and we're going to paint them black. So we're going to paint 2 of the cubes black and 2 of the rectangles black. So we're painting the cubes black because they're the same color as the shoes and it'll help blend them in. And then we'll paint the 2 rectangle pieces black as well. And you don't really have to paint the bottom, but you do need to paint the edges. And now we're going to attach the gnome to the stand now that the paint has dried. So all I'm going to do is figure out where I want my gnome to be and then take the little squares and put them right on the back of the shoes. We're not going to glue them down yet. We're just figuring out the spacing. And then take your pencil and just draw around the edges of the cubes so that you can see the markings, and then move your gnome and go ahead and glue your cubes onto the stand. And then just flip it over on its side and put some hot glue on the sides of the cubes. And then we'll glue the gnome's feet to those cubes to help him stand up. And you do need to hold it in place while it's drying. And so here he is on his stand. And now we're going to paint the back a solid color. I just thought it looked better. I painted right over the ribbon and the yarn just to give it a nice solid back so it didn't look so unfinished. And then you can put like a pumpkin. I told you I put a bunch of different magnets on things. So I have a heart. We have the carrots Dollar Tree sells. We had the snowflake. Here is a little bunch of flowers for him to hold, and a star for like the 4th of July and things like that. And then some of the felt little things you can make from Dollar Tree. They have these chicks and the rabbits. So now we're going to do part 2, which are the shadow box tiered houses. And we'll go over the supplies for this first. So we'll need some cardstock. I'm going to use this white and gray polka dot cardstock from Hobby Lobby. We'll use that second wood plank. We'll need 2 of these houses from the Dollar Tree and the large craft sticks to create shelves. We'll need some of the wood craft cubes to help hold the shelves on. And then we're going to be using some white paint, some gray paint, and some black paint. We're also going to use some paint brushes, and you could either use Mod Podge and a sponge brush, or you could just use regular school glue and a brush. We'll need some hot glue and a pair of scissors. So for part 2, we're going to start on the houses. So the first thing we're going to do is remove the back of the houses. Now the paper is just glued on there, so I cut around the edges there a little bit with a razor blade. You could just use the edge of a pair of scissors and then just push on the back, and the back of the house comes right off. You can remove the paper on the backing, though it's not necessary. I do like to remove the backing. Then we're going to lay the back on the house and trace around it with a pencil. This is going to help us figure out our spacing for the shelves. So we're going to mark where the edges of the house is at, so we know exactly where to cut for our shelving. So you just want to draw straight lines right on the edges where the shelves will sit. And these are the extra large craft sticks that you would get at like Walmart. They're not the large craft sticks from the Dollar Tree, just because we needed this thickness, because it's exactly the same thickness as the sides of the houses. And you're just going to cut these with a pair of scissors. Now for the short house, we're going to use just 1 shelf. And then for the skinny tall house, we made 2 shelves. And see how the shelf will sit between those lines there. So you just want to do the same process for the tall skinny house. Just trace around that frame and then mark your pieces for your shelving. And with the larger craft sticks, you can actually get both shelves out of 1 stick for this small house. And then I painted the shelving gray, since the backdrop of the houses are going to be that gray cardstock. I wanted to have the shelves blend in, so that's why we're using the gray paint. So you want to paint the top, the bottom, and then that front edge. You also want to paint the cubes that you're going to put underneath of the shelving gray, and then you'll cut a small piece of cardstock and put it on the one side that's going to face out underneath of the shelf, and that will help your little blocks blend into the background. And then I'm taking some white chalk paint and just painting the whole trim of the houses. Now you can leave them the natural wood. It's really up to you. I just wanted mine to be white because of all the coloring with the gnome that I chose to use. That's why I painted them white. But you can use them, leave them the natural wood color that they are, or you can paint them really any color. You don't need to paint the back. So while that paint dries, we're going to cover the back of the houses with the cardstock. You just want to lay the backdrop of the house onto the top of your cardstock there and just trace it with a pencil. Cut that out, and then you can glue it on again with either regular school glue and a sponge brush, or you could use the Mod Podge with a sponge brush. I actually ran out of sponge brushes, so I'm just going to use this extra large paintbrush to cover the backdrop here with the glue, and then glue our cardstock onto the back. Now, if you have any paper that's hanging over the edge, you can just use a sanding block or an emery board to help clean up the edges there. And now we have both of those done. We'll let those dry. And once they're all dry, we're just going to take some hot glue, or you could use some Fix-All adhesive if you like, and glue these back onto the back of the houses here. And now we're going to work on putting our shelving in. So we figure out where we want the shelves to be. And then I actually took my pencil and marked along the side of the wall to make sure that I have the right spacing where I want those to be, because we're going to put those little blocks in first. So once you have them marked, just take the shelves out, and then we're going to glue the cubes in. Initially, I had painted the cubes white, and they really kind of stuck out with a sore thumb, which is why I ended up painting them the same color as the shells, and then covering the little part that sticks out towards you with the cardstock to help it blend in. You just add a little bit of hot glue underneath of the shelf and on the side in the backdrop there, and then just glue your little block there. And then that glues the shelf to the block and the block to the side and helps hold it all together. So as you can see, the white blocks were really noticeable, so we painted those gray and covered those with the cardstock. And here's what they look like covered. So it really helped to blend them in. So now that second rectangle that we painted earlier when we did the stand for the gnome, we're just going to take some hot glue and put that right along the edge there and glue these two pieces together to create our stand. You do want to hold them in place while the glue is drying. And then we're going to take just some hot glue once we figured out where our houses were going to sit. And I'm going to glue the shorter house on first, and then the tall skinny house on next. And I did put them right next to each other so that they were touching. So I put some glue up the side of the house as well so that we could glue those together. And then I held them in place while they dried. And here's what it looks like with the shadow boxes on this stand as well. And now we can decorate those to match for the season as well as the gnome. So you could do just the first part, just do the gnome, leave him off of the stand if you like, and just have him stand alone by himself, or you can do the shadow boxes and do a whole little display for all the different holidays. It was really a lot of fun to make. Most of the items come from the Dollar Tree, which makes it pretty economical as well. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. And here are some other videos from our channel you might also enjoy. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.